So we have a customer that was looking to reduce costs. And when you reduce costs, it could be all over the place. It could be endpoints, it could be VDI, it could be VPN, it could be software, as you will. So when working with this customer, we were looking at where were they in their life cycle of their solutions, meaning their VDI, meaning their software solutions. And so as we were kind of getting through this workload, how they're using it, where are their costs coming from, we started to identify a couple key items, such as they are using VDI, they're also using Office products, and the users are generally just task workers. And I use task workers as the definition of task, is they log in and they just click something, send it off an email, receive an email, repeat the process. And so when we're looking at this solution, we say, how can we streamline this solution for the users, streamline it for IT, and ultimately bring their costs down? So when we're looking at the overall cost, VDI is a cost, and in this scenario, Office is a cost. So if we're looking at those, we can look at it and say they're accessing email to type an email, respond to a form, and have a
Yeah, use
desktop.
use a couple of web apps, maybe even if that. Yep.
Correct. Yep. Yep. I mean, everything that they're using in this particular scenario is all governed by a single sign-on using a multi-factor. Everything's web-based. So we were looking at this and say, we can help reduce your footprint from a cost standpoint, from an infrastructure standpoint, and from a help desk standpoint, if we reduce the levels of complexity. So when we're talking with them, we bring in an enterprise browser to say, can we do the same thing you're doing today? The customer first says, well, we use Office. How can we do that? Well, in the scenario, because they're just using Outlook, we came back with a solution and say, let's use Outlook on the web. We started with a POC, users started utilizing Outlook on the web. Anybody that's used the new Outlook on a Windows
Much better.
PC or a Mac PC, it's the same process. So end users half the time don't even know they're not even using original Outlook. They're just hitting a button on the desktop, happens to open up a tab, automatically signs them in the Outlook, and away they go. So now we can look at it and say, you're using an E3 and E5 license. Let's go ahead and cut those users down to an E1. So now we have web access. So that's a cost savings there. Then we look at it and say, well, if we're now cutting that down to a browser, do they really need a desktop? So now we shave that layer back and say, let's go ahead and add the enterprise browser on their endpoint, which they're already signing into. So they already have local credentials. So now we have a single icon on the desktop. They can double click on that, goes to a nice dashboard, and they see their Outlook button. They can click on that, and now they're in with their standard use case of, I can go and type my emails up. I can send files, either PDFs or respond to forms. Maybe I have to go into something like Workday to go send a PTO request. They have that ability all from that browser. And now we've reduced costs even more because we've reduced, let's say, vSphere costs because they don't have ESXi overheads. We can start shutting down hosts, which saves power. You don't have to have engineers necessarily focusing on, we have to make sure desktops are up to date. So your maintenance can be reduced. Those users are still in there. They have to manage your enterprise browser and your policies and data governance. So they're still utilizing technology. We're just reducing the footprint and costs of the overarching solution.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a couple of different perfect storm scenarios that are going on with customers right now between Windows 10 and Windows 11.
Huge.
Their hypervisor of choice, right? Potentially VMware and going down that path. Infrastructure, right? Maybe their storage or their compute is coming up for renewal. Heck, maybe their data center contract is coming up for renewal, along with the endpoints themselves. And we even talk about like using like thin clients, as an endpoint potentially as a replacement to reduce not only the like Windows licensing, but also potentially reduce even further complexity of maintenance and management and other things that go along with that in the VDI world.
Yep. And if you think about it from an endpoint scenario, and great point on the thin clients, if we can reduce that even further, as we know, there are large groups of individuals that have worked with Intune, with the SCCMs of the world. And so if we can take that and reduce the footprint even further, then we can go in and get rid of Windows licensing. So we can save costs on that. We can bring it to a level that a lot of these enterprise browsers, and I'll use Island and Citrix as an example, both have Linux applications available. And you take those and put it on a managed thin client, and now you've reduced your footprint as far as your overhead of managing the operating system, packages, security, hot fixes, and the actual deployment of the application to a ecosystem that everything generally just works together in a lower requirement of hardware. Now you can even reduce your costs on your actual endpoint hardware, whether your laptops, your desktops, your all-in-ones.